It's just like data go in, data go out. It's exactly kind of the abstraction that you want out of Kafka. Like you pay somebody a small amount of money, you get to keep your data, you don't have to think about it.
That's Alex Haugland, an engineer at Anysphere, but you may know them better as the developers of Cursor, the AI-powered IDE. As always, we're diving deep into data streaming. From WarpStream by Confluent helping Anysphere keep data private, to delivering ultra-fast and ever-improving AI-powered user experiences, all while scaling through the success of their product. I'm Joseph Moraes, technical champion at Confluent and your host. This is Life is But a Stream. Let's get started. Well, thanks for being here, Alex. Let's jump right into it. Tell us about Cursor.
So Cursor is an AI-forward IDE, or put differently, it's our attempt to figure out what software development should look like for the next 10 years.
Nice.
We're trying to explore this sort of combination of what people can do and what machines can do, and how the two of them together can be stronger than just one on their own.
I like that because I have had a couple of guests that are really focused on AI. And one person contextualized it. They're like, we have an AI workforce and a human workforce. And I was like, wow, that really is the future. And Cursor is like a way to bridge that. How do I empower my humans with AI goodness? And Cursor is a great way to do that. So my understanding though, Alex, is that the company's name is actually Anysphere. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so we have this interesting relationship where everyone thinks that we're Confluent, which is weird because that's not even the name of the company, it's Atlassian. And that's just one of their products, but we're Confluent and that's our company name?
Wait, you work for Atlassian?
No, I don't.
You just said you worked for Atlassian.
But that's interesting. So even though your company name is Anysphere, everyone knows you for Cursor, so everyone probably just calls you guys Cursor.
Yeah, it's like some news outlets will refer to us as Anysphere, but I think that's just because somebody there is a stickler. We don't actually care.
Good. Well, I guess that's the success. That's the result of being so successful. You build a great product, everyone wants to call you by it. So I think that's a good problem in your case. So tell me, who are Cursor or Anysphere's customers?
So it's a surprising mix, actually. It's a really large cohort of what we call pro users, which are individuals who've chosen to purchase a Cursor subscription, and enterprises. So large enterprises who have some sort of contract with us through sales and all that.
Well, I think it's exciting, right? It's exciting tech, and it's exciting for people that have done it for a while, like your enterprise customers, and also people that are quote unquote vibe coding, right? They now see artificial intelligence as removing barriers to entry to what I think is going to be essential for so many people moving forward. Just knowing how to turn your desires into code so that you can get computers doing your job or doing something for you is a really powerful paradigm.
I think one way that we kind of like to look at it is that programming is kind of a bug. The fact that it's so hard to tell the computer what you want it to do is not a feature, it's not good that I don't know, if I want to sort all my emails that I got today by the last letter of the thing, I got a script and do a bunch of figure out APIs and authentication, none of that is good. None of that is what people wanted when they set out to make computers. And that's just how it's kind of been this whole time. And a world where you can just say computer, make a script, and it just does that is kind of the dream we've always had for computing, right? If you go back to the original Star Trek, it's just you just talk to the computer, right? You're not sitting there typing Python into the Enterprise.
That's exactly where I was going with it. I'm a huge tracker, and they did everything through natural language, right? They just told the computer what to do, and it did it, and that is what we should be striving for.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I didn't think Star Trek would come up on this, but that's great. So we set the stage, so let's dive deeper into the heart of your data streaming journey. So Alex, this is a very interesting episode for me. So you guys are customers of WarpStream.
Yes.
And this is the first time having a WarpStream customer on the show. So first, for the audience, WarpStream is this incredible technology. It's built on top of object storage. So think something like S3 on Amazon, on AWS. And they built these incredible agents that basically talk Kafka protocol and then write to object storage. And they were a competitor to ours until we acquired them. And they filled this amazing gap that we had. So we have software that's self-managed called Confluent Platform. You can run that in the cloud or in your data center or the edge, wherever you want it. We have a fully managed product called Confluent Cloud. And then we were missing something that would fit BYOC or bring your own cloud. And that was what WarpStream was for us. And what it proved to be for our customers like Cursor is it's this amazing kind of lower cost BYOC alternative where you kind of trade latency for cost, but then you could do things at massive scale. So I think I categorized that right, Alex, right?
Well, I think there's a couple other things that I think we think are important about WarpStream.
Cool. I want to hear from you.
Yeah. So one of them, like you mentioned latency. The latency on WarpStream is actually pretty good.
That's
like
great.
I think a thing that Richie, one of the founders of WarpStream, explained a while ago is that like most people don't really need like 100 millisecond, 10 millisecond Kafka latency. Like it's just not important. Like at least for us, like we could use 10, 20, 50 second Kafka latency. We would never care. Like we're mostly using it for slower stuff. And if you're willing to accept like just a little bit of latency, it makes so many things so much easier. Like you no longer have to worry about like provisioning compute and storage like together. You don't have to worry for like scaling your stuff. You just kind of get this magical like WarpStream put stuff in S3 and I have some number of WarpStream nodes and I just don't ever think about it. And in exchange, latency is like 500 milliseconds. Oh my God, like that doesn't matter. But the thing that we actually, I think, value a lot more about WarpStream isn't so much like the way that it scales or any of the performance stuff or even the cost particularly. It's the fact that the way that it handles the data means that at the end of the day, it's in our cloud. So like all of the data is stored in S3 in a place that we control. And our business is kind of built on top of data. And a lot of it is data that like people have been really generous and like allowed us to use, right? Like if you're a pro subscription person and you sign up for Cursor, one of the things you'll be presented with immediately is like, do you want us to be able to train on your data? So like when you press tab in Cursor, we see if you accept the suggestion or if we don't, as like the most basic example. And people allow us to do that. And like, that is something that we do not take lightly, right? Like you don't have to do that. We are not like paying you lots of money to do it, but we hope that people think that if they let us, you know, have our data, then we will train on that data and we will make a better product. And that's kind of the promise that we try to fulfill is like, if you let us look at your data, we will train tab on it. And we make an even better tab model that you guys can use. But we think that that also bestows upon us a really serious responsibility to like not leak the data, not like do anything weird with the data, not let anybody else see the data, not let us see the data where possible. Like we want to like kind of honor that trust that people are putting in us and really only use it to kind of further the thing that they've given it for, which is like building the best model we can serve to our users. And so WarpStream kind of lets us do that in a way where the data sits entirely inside stuff that we control and have access to. And so we don't have to worry about like, oh man, like if our data provider gets hacked, like what are we going to do? Like all of people's stuff is out there. Like it's a huge problem. Like it's a betrayal of our users' trust. Like it's a serious thing.
Absolutely.
And being able to just say like all this stuff is locked down in S3, we have control to it. There's just nothing going on there is like really, really, really important to us.
So that's interesting. All right, there's a couple of things I want to unpack there. So first, I think it's very important that if we are going to use our customers' data, that we're upfront about it. And you guys are extremely transparent about it. It's like one of the first things people set is like, do you want to train? Do you allow us to train on your data or not? And then once you're transparent about it and you get that buy-in, the next step is what you just said is like, you have to take that data seriously. They opted in, they're helping you make your product better. We have to make sure that we can secure that. So having that sovereignty over your data is another great differentiator of WarpStream. And I guess that really kind of begs the question, what specific use case are you using that you're utilizing data streaming through WarpStreaming for as it pertains to Cursor?
So we've got a number of things. Like I alluded to earlier, one of the primary ones is for stuff like tab, where it's like, hey, like people press tab a lot, as you might be able to imagine. And when they have privacy mode turned off, we will kind of collect the aggregate data there and try to say, okay, like, are we serving good suggestions to people? Like, is the latest iteration of the tab model good? Or is it like really kind of hurting our metrics and is it bad? And then, okay, how do we figure out why? Like, we don't want to be sitting here like serving people a really bad tab model and then sending an email survey being like, hey, like, do you like the new tab model? Like, that's ridiculous, right? Like, we want to be able to figure out as quickly as possible if we've made a mistake so we can get you like a better model as quickly as possible.
Of course.
And so WarpStream is kind of core to that story of like pulling in the analytics of like how people use tab, seeing what it does, and then kind of feeding into our ML pipelines to make sure that we were able to like build the best tab model that we possibly can. And kind of the other broad categories are like more general telemetry, like when you're using the agent and you have privacy mode disabled, and you have like a bad request, like why? Like how do we kind of store enough data to be able to look at that and go, okay, the user didn't like have a good experience here. What's going on? And like that's not like a particularly latency sensitive thing, but it is kind of important that you capture it. And then the third broad category is for like accounting purposes, right? Like if you send us a request, like we kind of want to be able to charge you for the request. Like that's, you know, that's a fairly important thing for the business. But it's not usually like super, super, super latency sensitive. Like it's not usually mission critical that like if you say, hey, you can have 500 requests, that you can only have exactly 500 requests, or if you can spend $10, you can only spend exactly $10. Like you want to be pretty tight on it, but the important thing is that you don't let people go like wildly over. It's not so much that like, oh, like we want to crash because like we're not 100% certain if you're at $9 or $9.99. Like, yeah, you want to kind of err
Right,
on
you
the
got it
side
from
of like,
tolerance. Right.
yeah, you want to have a little bit of tolerance. And so like we find that that lines up pretty well with the kind of guarantees that we get out of WarpStream. We're like 99.99% of the time it's super fast and it's dead on. And like if it's a little bit delayed, like it's fine. We'll like give the user credit or whatever.
Now, the latencies for telemetry and for accounting, I assume, are these things happening asynchronously outside of the experience? Because I do imagine any added latency to something like predicting a tab, that would be bad for the user experience. So is that kind of hidden in the things that you're doing with
all of that stuff is completely off the critical path. Like we're not like waiting to show you tab suggestions like entangled with
right, you're not waiting for that to come back
yeah.
from WarpStream to deliver that.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
That's like totally parallel, separate pipeline.
Cool, okay, and that makes a lot of sense. So now you can give that razor sharp, ultra fast user experience, but still tolerate this, slightly higher latency in the back end to serve that telemetry and accounting use case.
Yeah, because like, we want it to be correct within like, order seconds, and that's fine.
Now, tell me about what Cursor's objectives are, right? Or Anysphere's objectives. Like, what were the objectives building like the initial set of Cursor functionalities, and kind of what are the challenges and objectives today?
So I think if you want to go to like the super high level goals, it's what I said up front about we want to build this like fusion of computer and person, like trying to be the best engineer that you possibly can. If you want to be a little bit megalomaniacal about it, we want to like give humans better things to do. Like we don't want to spend our time typing Python. We don't want to spend our time debugging bash scripts. We want to like work on more interesting problems. We want to do more interesting things. And to be able to do that with computers requires like leveling up the abstraction with which we interface with them.
Sure.
And that's kind of like the like high level mission sort of thing. But I think there's a bit more like in the tactical sense where we're trying not to be like, we're not trying to like do this in a super philosophically, like it must be done this way sort of sense. We're trying to say like, what is the best we can do with the technology available to us today? So like, given that the way that the models work, given the way that like people interact with them, what is the best way we can put this together to make it useful to people? Let's not like try to build a product that requires a model that doesn't exist. Let's not try to put a model in a place where it doesn't belong. Let's kind of try to like take everything that we have to us today and try to build the best thing we can like right now today with those things, knowing that like in 6 months, the best thing might be different. Like we're just kind of trying to say, what is the best thing we can do right now today for everything?
Yeah, so I've always lived by the idea of done is better than perfect. And I think perfect is hard and it has diminishing returns, right? I think it's important that you're taking that view because like you said, we're in this unprecedented time of software.
I've been saying that for a while now.
Yeah, but you know what? And it's true, but it's really next level now. I mean, Cursor is an example of it. The fact is you can take someone with almost no experience and they can end build something. It may not be great, but they could do it. We've never really had that. Like we've had that for websites and like Wix.com and Squarespace. Like the idea of people writing HTML right now is like unheard of, but that was a reality, right? And I think there is this reality, and it's probably not that far away, where people don't type into their IDE, right? It's all human language. It's all natural language. And I think that makes the possibilities insane because now anyone could be a developer and any idea could actually kind of catch fire. It's really
the way that I kind of like to think about it is that like there's a lot of problems that people spend their time on like in software that are not actually like hard problems. Like there's something philosophically difficult about them. Like the thing I said about like, hey, I want to sort my emails differently. Like that's not a difficult thing to do. There's not really like an inherent complexity to like, I want to sort my email titles. But like the thing wasn't made to do that. And so making it do that is actually hard. And I think there's a ton of tasks like throughout our lives where tools like Cursor are able to make those things so much easier. Like you can build little utilities, you can build little one-off scripts where it's like, I wouldn't normally bother with this. It's going to take me like a couple hours, but now it's just like Cursor, make me a script to like tidy up my to-do list. And you can just do that. And you don't need to be an expert. And like, it doesn't matter if it's like 100% bulletproof mission critical. It's a silly little Python script. Like the barrier to entry on that is so low now. And I think that's wonderful.
And, we actually have a quote that's from one of the co-founders of WarpStream, Ryan, about the usage of Cursor at WarpStream at Confluent. And it's kind of this amazing kind of like self-fulfilling Ouroboros, right? Where their engineers are improving WarpStream, which you guys are using, which feeds the telemetry and counting, which feeds the betterment of Cursor, which then makes their job easier. Kind of impressive, right? If you think about that.
I think about that a lot because like you got to remember we're using Cursor to build Cursor. Like,
Yeah. See, I didn't even think about that. Yes. And you guys are doing that. That is so weird. Can you take me through how you approached scaling telemetry and accounting to increase the load? I know that you guys have grown, and for those non-privacy users or those privacy users, I know that they're hitting those systems differently. But what did scaling look like for that?
so in the case of like the WarpStream side of things, right? You just don't think about it. It just it scales up and you don't think about it. It's like I think we've spent 0 hours thinking about scaling WarpStream in the last few months. It's just like it's a solved problem. The servers in front of WarpStream that like ingest the data and then enqueue it, like they just kind of hang out. We get more of them. It's not a big problem. It's not interesting.
Okay.
I think the part that's actually been more of a bit of a struggle is what happens like after the data leaves WarpStream and we write it to a database, and then it's like, okay, but like, do we want to write this to a different database? Do we want to like reshuffle it in some way? We've been using some managed non-Confluent services to do some of those things, and they've been giving us some like teething problems, but those are probably due for a rewrite in the next couple weeks.
Now, with these systems, I know you guys started with WarpStream. Was there like a tipping point to implement data streaming for telemetry and counting, or was that kind of like a no-brainer? We know we're going to use data streaming, we just got to figure out what flavor of it.
I think it was just kind of like a how else would you do it sort of thing. Like, obviously, you're not just going to take the data and send it to your server and your server's going to write it down on disk. Like, that's an insane thing to do in the cloud era. And you don't really want to write it straight to a database necessarily because, like, at least a lot of the managed databases and cloud databases that we've used, like, they've got some, occasional sadnesses, especially if you're doing a whole bunch of unbatched random writes, right? Like, you don't want to just, like, have your database going, like, here's a bajillion writes all the time. They're not batched, they're not sorted, they're not grouped. It's just, like, here's a giant cacophony of garbage, basically.
Right.
And so at minimum, having something like WarpStream or Kafka to like take all of the telemetry you're getting and like kind of do a little reshuffling, batching, sharding is like a really nice thing to have. And then you get all of the availability benefits of like having it buffer the data, keep it in object storage. Like, oh, if your database is down, it's fine. WarpStream's got it. Like, as long as we can get it to WarpStream, we got it covered.
Right. So it was clearly a real-time use case. It needed that decoupling. WarpStream just made sense. Now, you called out taking the data to other systems, right? Whether that's a database. I'm curious, are there any other ISVs like Confluent that you're using, or maybe, CSP native services that you have integrated with WarpStream? I know they have their connector package, it's Bento. And I'm just curious if you're using any of those pieces of the technology.
We use Bento fairly heavily to pull data out of WarpStream and write it into like a variety of managed databases and self-hosted databases.
Cool. So like an example, I don't know. I think you guys on AWS? I don't know if you could say.
We have a fairly large AWS presence.
Okay, got you. So something like Aurora or an RDS, you're connecting those services together. Yeah. That's great.
But like, depending on the use case, right? Like if it's like counting stuff, maybe like a smaller database. If it's like analytics, maybe a bigger database. If it's stuff for like ML models, maybe we're just writing it straight to S3. Like it kind of depends.
Cool. And I think that's kind of one of the wonderful flexibilities, whether it's Kafka Connect and our Confluent connectors or Bento and all those connectors. Having that flexibility to say, I can direct these streams to these downstream sources. I didn't mean to be so redundant, but I could send this data here, and I could send this data here, or I could send this data to 5 places. The flexibility is really impressive.
And if you mess it up, you rewind and go back, right?
Yes. And then of course I can replay. So you have all that flexibility. Or like you said, you can suddenly, I have a new data system. It's brand new. I'll just start the connector from the beginning of the topic, and suddenly all that data that has been there for months is now in this downstream system.
And since it's stored in S3, it's very cheap. You don't actually have to pay that much to keep it there.
Exactly. Right. So these are all things that are music, I think, to many people's ears when they're thinking about the explosion of data.
Yeah.
So let me summarize this. So you had this address processing high volumes of telemetry and accounting data. And the only way to do that, or the best way to do that, was data streaming, because it was inherently event driven. You needed to, have this decoupled substrate. You landed on WarpStream because you were, your founders were fans of the tech. That's awesome. And also because it had that BYOC flavor, which allowed you to protect the data for your customers that opt in. Is there, to get into business terms, is there a specific KPI that's tied to telemetry and accounting? I'm curious, is there any specific metrics that you're looking for, throughput, latency, that is key to these particular two systems?
I mean, I think the biggest one is like, if you're looking from like an observability standpoint, like we keep an eye on like the latency and like how delayed the topic is, but like we don't really necessarily get upset until it's like in the hours, right?
Right.
Like for a lot of these topics, it's not critical that it show up for quite a while. Like if it's the training data for a model, like for the new tab model, for example, It's not that big of a deal if it's delayed by 6 hours. Like, we should fix it. It probably means something is broken, but like, it's not like, oh my God, the data's a bit delayed, we're screwed. Usually it's like our consumer is broken in some way, and so we got to go fix it. Like, that's fine. But like at a more high level perspective, it's not so much the data streaming is like what it enables. Like, are our models good? Like, is the new tab model good? Like, that's kind of more the KPI. Like, do people like our product? Like, do we have accurate billing? Like, that stuff is a lot more important than like any particular KPI.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately, I think that's a very pragmatic way of building something, right? It's like things could be, I mean, obviously you should fix it, right? You don't want the consumer not working. But if your KPI is ultimately experience, you can build the technology around the experience and ensure that even if there are rough edges, that they're not affecting the experience. I think you guys have figured that out. So next, we're going to dive into how your partnership with Confluent solves some of your data challenges. But first, a quick word from our sponsor.
Your data shouldn't be a problem to manage. It should be your superpower. The Confluent data streaming platform transforms organizations with trustworthy, real-time data that seamlessly spans your entire environment and powers innovation across every use case. Create smarter, deploy faster, and maximize efficiency with the true data streaming platform from the pioneers in data streaming.
Now, we'll go beyond the stream on why Confluent was the right fit for Cursor and Anysphere. So you guys knew that data streaming was the answer, right? There's a reason why Kafka is, a de facto standard and was able to address that telemetry and accounting use case. But there's also a lot to wrangle with Kafka. Now, I know that the founders were fans of WarpStream, but was there any consideration of using like open source options versus implementing WarpStream?
Well, so I think that like the fan thing is kind of how they like heard about it, right? It's not like they were not like crazily widely advertised at the time.
Okay, yeah.
But I think like it's really just the characteristics of the system that were really appealing, right? Like if you look at WarpStream, you get to own your data. It sits in your S3 buckets, but you don't have to worry about managing a control plane, which is like by far the biggest pain in the ass of managing a system like that.
That's true.
And you don't have to worry about scaling or storage or compute because it's just like you get some amount of WarpStream nodes. You don't have to worry about routing between them. You just kind of have them. You have some amount of storage, which is an S3, which you never need to worry about scaling because it's S3, who cares?
That's true.
You don't have to worry about the relationship between the two of them. It's just like data go in, data go out. Like it's exactly kind of the abstraction that you want out of Kafka. Like you pay somebody a small amount of money, you get to keep your data, you don't have to think about it.
I mean, I can't think of a better advertisement than data goes in and data goes out. And like, you don't really think about it. So again, my background is in operations. I ran open source Kafka clusters. I hated it. And it was like closer to 10 years ago when, even open source wasn't quite as robust as it is now. And it's like you said, it's a distributed system. You have to worry about everything. You have to worry about connectivity between AZs. You have to worry about disks running out. You have to worry about CPUs burning their cores out. And
like getting exactly the right mix of CPU versus disk for any given workload. And it's like, I don't want to think about that.
And memory and all that. And to have something that just works and have it backed by something that is so robust like S3 that has it's like 10 nines worth of durability. Just incredible. And so, okay.
Like also, by the way, it's cheaper. Like that was also kind of nice. Like
it just works and we could do it for less money. Just incredible. So I'm curious with the partnership and the fact that you guys don't have to worry about your data streams. It just works. How are your teams interacting with WarpStream for telemetry and accounting? Like what does like a typical day in somebody that works on that code look like?
People don't usually work on it. Like it just kind of works.
So they're really kind of just ignorant to that substrate.
Yeah, like I'm trying not to be hyperbolic, but like people do not, I think, interact with the WarpStream like related stuff on a regular basis. Like sometimes people are like, hey, I need to add a new like field to this object, and like it gets piped through the telemetry. But like that's adding a field to a protobuf somewhere, and then like maybe adding a thing to Bento depending on what you're doing, and that's it. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, honestly, again, that's one of those things from like an operations standpoint would probably be like the biggest compliment I could get. So in operations, I've done various things. I was a DevOps engineer, I was a network administrator, and just having someone not worry about something that you run is really like a feather in your cap, right? Because what's the opposite of that? Well, we worry about our data stream platform all the time. It breaks constantly. We hate it. And I have I have nightmares of PagerDuty because one of our Kafka nodes failed, and the fact that you guys have had that and you're having it at your level of success with the amount that you guys are scaling, those are all really good things. So
I mean, we occasionally get pages that have the word WarpStream in them, but like, it's like I said, almost always because the consumer is broken, and like, that's not actually WarpStream's fault in any way.
Yeah, I was going to say, WarpStream can't fix that, unfortunately. So with a project this ambitious, like, trying to fuse humans and AI into these super powered software engineers, there's got to be more than tech to consider. How do you approach getting businesses on board? So I'm curious, like, outside of engineering, there's a business side to Anysphere and Cursor. And was there any friction in like making sure that data streaming was put to the front for these particular use cases?
So we've got like actually a fairly healthy split between what we call like our GTM team and our engineering team. Like it's about like half and half, because people recognize quite early that like, hey, like we have this tremendous amount of pro users that like really like our product that just kind of come to us. And that's, that's a really like fortunate position to be in. But there's also like all these companies out there, and like nobody's going to go get a 1,000-person contract like through PayPal. Like they don't want to just like type their email in and do the thing. They want to talk to a guy. They want to have a contract. They want to talk to a lawyer. Like there's all this kind of stuff you have to do to like actually sell stuff to businesses. And, we've got a lot of people working on that. And there's also like kind of an analytics side to that too, where like if a business is purchasing your product, they kind of want to know like, what are people using it for? Like, do they like it? Is it working? And so like we also have like user facing analytics, which I don't think I mentioned up front, are also powered like by this kind of same telemetry stream. So like if you send it to the dashboard on like an enterprise account, it's like, hey, like here's how much tab people are using. Here's how much agent people are using. Like here's how many lines of code people are accepting. And a lot of that work has been driven through our enterprise engineering / GTM teams, kind of building on top of these same tools.
See, I didn't think about that. So you have, customers at the enterprise level validating, hey, look at how much code's coming out. Like they may even have metrics that they knew, lines of committed code per engineer on a given day prior to using Cursor. And then
I kind of hope that they're not like incentivizing people to commit as much code as possible, but like
I realize that's not a great metric, but it's something, right? And if you
I'm sure someone is.
I know. Like people like, oh, I committed 10,000 lines of code yesterday, but it's like a docs page, like okay, but not impressive. But if you have some metric, right? And maybe there are better ones. You can. It sounds like, using Cursor's UI, you have these user-facing metrics that could say, hey, we think Cursor's doing better. Like we can justify our cost and our investment in Cursor because we have these metrics. And I didn't realize that was being powered by data streaming. So I imagine on the business side, that makes people very happy. Now, I'm curious, were there any unexpected final impacts? Because like you said, telemetry and accounting, came after the MVP of Cursor. So once it was implemented, obviously you mentioned it helps train the model, better tab suggestion, things like that. But was there anything that you learned from the telemetry and accounting data that you weren't expecting?
I think there's like also just little product things where it's like, oh, I didn't know people like use this that often. Or I didn't know people never use this button or whatever, where it's like, if you've ever worked in an organization that like transitioned from like being kind of vibes-based product development to like analytics-based product development, like we don't want to live wholly in either world, right? Like we don't want to just say like, oh, this makes the percent go up by 2%, like we're canceling the feature. Like we want to kind of, mix the two. But
you want informed vibes.
We want informed vibes, right? Like we don't want to be sitting here going like, this is the most important feature ever, and go like, actually this feature is used by 1% of users. Like
right.
Maybe it's really important to those 1%, but like you kind of want that vibe check of your analytics where it's like, okay, like how many of our users are on Linux? How many of our users are on Windows? How many of our users use SSH? Like how many of our users use this extension? How many people use Rust? Like all that sort of stuff where it's like, you really kind of need to know vaguely where your user base is at in order to like make the right decisions for them. And so like all of the analytics stuff powers those sorts of things.
I like it. It's very impressive. Honestly, the whole story, implementing accounting and metrics and telemetry on top of an already running system, doing that cleanly, doing it without affecting the user experience, and then having that ultimately build a better product is just all in all a really exciting story. Now, could you, for the audience, share some tips, tricks, or gotchas for anyone that's trying to tackle data streaming? Is there anything, other than using WarpStream and just working, are there any things any rough edges that you could call out that you think would be helpful for the folks out there?
I think my first answer, which is maybe not the one you want to hear, is like, consider how much data you actually have. Because like, I think there's a lot of cases where people want to jump straight into like, oh, I've got big data. Like I need to go buy like a ClickHouse instance and I need to set up like 100 Kafka queues and like, I need to set up DBT, and it's like, how many users do you have? Oh, we have 100 users. And it's like,
Overkill.
you can just put all that in a SQLite database and you will have a fantastic time. Like, I think it's really important to like kind of pick the right scale of tool for the problem, and using like a tool like WarpStream for like a really, really, really small use case is just like more annoying than it's worth. But at the same time, like if you've got a lot of data, you've got a lot of use case, like pick an appropriate tool. So I think that's like the biggest gotcha I see people fall into, is just like completely like mismatching like the scope of the problem, either like picking something really stupid, like I'm just going to put all my stuff in a SQLite database when they have 100 million users, or like the opposite, right?
Yeah, honestly, that's really good. And again, like it's not something, I think people should right size their data, right? And that's why we here, whether it's WarpStream or Confluent, we have things that auto scale, because we realize sometimes you make a decision and you want to have a system that it can grow, but you don't want to over provision or kill yourself in over complexity when, like you said, you have an MVP, you have like 50 people working at your company. You don't need all that.
And like WarpStream, I think is nice because as long as you have like at least a little bit of usage, like you're not paying a ton, like if you can justify having like one WarpStream node, then like you're fine, right? Like as long as you kind of meet that threshold, then like you're not wasting a bunch of money on stuff you don't need.
Yeah, and then you scale it when you need to.
Yeah.
So I'm curious kind of to, we still have one more segment, but to kind of close out our conversation about the partnership and about data streaming, what is your vision or the company's vision for data streaming in the future?
So I think that it's going to kind of continue to be like the lifeblood of the company, right? Like we want to be able to take the stuff that our product is doing and make sure that it is good as possible. That's kind of the whole thing about like AI and machine learning, right? It's like you try a thing, you see if it works out. You try a thing, you see if it works out. And we need to kind of continue to like build upon that in our product and like see what people are doing with it, see what they like, see what they don't like, see what works, see what doesn't work, and use that to build the best product that we possibly can.
I love it. And I love that WarpStream was there for you guys to help you transition from like purely vibes to analytic informed vibes. That's going to be one of my favorite takeaways from this episode, no doubt about it. So before we let you go, we're going to do a lightning round. Bite-sized questions, bite-sized answers. That is BYTE. They're like hot takes, but schema backed and serialized. That's right. We're using schema registry here, Alex.
Okay.
What's something you hate about IT?
Glorifying complexity.
Glorify complexity. Yeah, too much data, glorify complexity. You have a theme there. I like that. What is your hot take on the future of artificial intelligence?
It is going to be less impressive than people think it will, but more impressive than people think it will.
What's a non-tech activity that's impacted how you think about data?
Gardening with my wife.
I love that. How?
Because like the decisions that you make today have an impact like years from now, and you don't really get to kind of skip ahead and see what the consequences are.
No, that's really good. My proudest moment, it's not gardening, but when we bought a house, I planted 25 emerald green arborvitaes. And someone said, hey, normally you're going to lose 10% of them. So if you lose 2 or 3, not a big deal. They all lived. And not only they lived, one got hit by a car. One got run over by a car and it's still alive. I just had to stand it back up. It's amazing. Where are you getting outside inspiration? Whether it's from a book or thought leaders or a thought leader as it pertains to your day-to-day job at Anysphere?
On a day-to-day basis, I'm not sure. I think like on like a more long-term basis, my answer might be the aviation industry.
Okay, cool.
Because that's one of the places where people have been able to take things that are just unfathomably complicated and make them boring and routine.
Yeah, I guess, and that's true. I mean, when you think of like success rates or in airlines and, how statistically safe they are and how complex they are and the fact that they have to deal with multiple types of weather and, takeoffs and liftoffs and literally tens of thousands of planes across a lifetime. That's a really good place for inspiration.
You
I like that.
You take this machine that's like amongst the most complicated mankind has ever built, and people are like, oh, it's so boring. I have to go on a flight for 6 hours. And it's like, how did we kind of bridge that gap?
Oh, how do we make the ultra complex mundane? I love that. That's really good. And I think you guys are trying to do that with coding. So there you go. We've gone full circle. And with that said, Alex, any final thoughts or anything to plug?
I mean, I think I got to plug Cursor, right? Like you should download
You
Cursor.
have to
It's a
plug
great app.
Cursor. You have to. They'll fire you if you don't plug Cursor.
And I think I also have to plug WarpStream, right? Like WarpStream is great. You should use WarpStream.
Please do. I didn't tell him to say that, but I do appreciate it.
No, I think maybe Richie told me though. You'll never know.
Richie's like DMing you on Slack. Honestly, Alex, is one of my favorite conversations that I've had here. So thank you so much for joining me today. For the audience, stick around after this because I'm giving you my top 3 takeaways in 2 minutes. So let's talk about the takeaways from this episode. Well, the first one is, when I asked Alex about WarpStream and the success that they've had at Anysphere building out Cursor with it, he said data goes in and data goes out. Their engineers do not interact with it. Well, that to me as an operations person is kind of the best compliment you can get when you're building any type of distributed complex software. The fact that the folks at Anysphere don't have to worry about this, that they know that their data stream is basically bulletproof. They don't have to worry about the scaling, the networking, the various AZs. They can just focus on what they're doing, getting that telemetry and that accounting data to give them that informed vibes to build a better product. Just incredible, right? I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone else for that is a WarpStream customer, so I'm so happy to hear that Anysphere is having that level of success. And the fact that they're using Cursor to build Cursor, that's my next takeaway. That's just wild, right? The idea that you build something like a AI-powered IDE, and now you can use it to improve itself. It's just, if you don't think that the future is here, I don't know what other point I can make to you. I guess it's kind of like, before there were cars, and someone eventually built trucks, and then you would use trucks to move around other truck parts, which you couldn't have done before that. But making Cursor to make Cursor better is just kind of an amazing thing. And that leads me to the most interesting takeaway. And that Alex said that coding is really just a bug. And that kind of blew my mind because it's true. We ultimately just want computers to do what we want it to do. And they all start as just ideas, right? That could be written in natural language. I want an application that does this, and I want it to input this, and I want it to output that. And the fact is that we just have to code in Python or Java because we don't have a better way to interact with our computers is really just a bug. And with that future, with things like Cursor, giving that infusion of AI power to the creativity of humanity, just an incredible thing. And I'm going to hold on to that one for a while. That's it for this episode of Life is But a Stream. As always, we're brought to you by Confluent. The Confluent data streaming platform is the data advantage every organization needs to innovate today and win tomorrow. Your unified platform to stream, connect, process, and govern your data starts at confluent.io. If you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, tell a friend or coworker about us, and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time.